Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Minnesota Vikings just dropped a bomb on their own roster, and trust me, this is way bigger than anyone expected. While everyone was bracing for some changes, what just went down in Minnesota is absolutely nuclear. The purple and gold are tearing apart the very foundation that former GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah built just 1 year ago, and the casualties are piling up faster than Brett Favre could throw interceptions in the Metrodome. Get ready, because we're about to dive deep into the most dramatic Vikings offseason saga since the team let Dante Culpepper walk, and this one comes with 40 million reasons why it's all going down right now. Let's start with the breaking news that sent shockwaves through the entire NFL. Jonathan Allen, the two-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle who was supposed to be the missing piece in Brian Flores' defensive puzzle, is officially done in Minnesota after just one season. That's right, one single season. The Vikings signed this man to a 3-year, $51 million contract in March of 2025, handed him $16.2 million for 1 year of work, and now they're showing him the door faster than you can say salary cap disaster. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, the Vikings are releasing Allen due to salary cap constraints, and while that sounds like corporate speak, let me translate what that really means. It means the Vikings are in deep trouble financially, sitting more than $40 million over the salary cap heading into 2026, and they're scrambling like a quarterback with the entire defensive line in his face. Now here's where it gets absolutely wild. By releasing Jonathan Allen, the Vikings are only saving $6.5 million against the cap. You heard that right. They're paying this man $51 million total, already gave him $16 million, and they're still on the hook for massive dead cap money just to get him off the roster. They're essentially lighting money on fire just to create a little breathing room. That's how desperate things have gotten in Minneapolis. But wait, it gets worse. Jonathan Allen isn't some scrub they picked up off the practice squad. This is a former first-round pick of the Washington Commanders, a guy who made back-to-back Pro Bowls in 2021 and 2022, a legitimate NFL talent who spent 8 years terrorizing quarterbacks in the nation's capital. Sure, his production dipped last season with only 68 tackles and 3.5 sacks in 17 games, but he played 76% of the defensive snaps, the highest rate among Minnesota defensive linemen. He was doing the dirty work, eating up blocks, making space for others to shine. And now, he's gone. Just like that, one and done, which brings us to the absolutely insane pattern that's emerging here. Jonathan Allen is the third major veteran the Vikings are cutting loose in what can only be described as a full-scale demolition of last year's roster. First, they told running back Aaron Jones, the former Green Bay Packer, who rushed for over 800 yards, that he's no longer needed. That move saves them $7.75 million. Then came Javon Hargrave, Allen's partner in crime on the defensive line, another massive free agent signing from 2025. Hargrave's release saves them nearly $11 million. Do the math, and you've got 3 veteran players, all signed within the last year, all shown the exit door, saving the Vikings a combined $25.15 million. But even with all these cuts, Minnesota is still deep in the red. They're still over the cap, still scrambling, still looking for more bodies to throw overboard before the start of the new league year on March 11th. And here's the kicker that really exposes just how badly Kwesi Adofo-Mensah screwed this up before getting fired. The Vikings spent nearly $350 million last offseason. Let me repeat that. $350 million to bulk up the roster around second-year quarterback J.J. McCarthy, only to watch the team start 4-8 and get eliminated from playoff contention before December even ended. That's not just a bad investment, that's a catastrophic failure of historic proportions. Think about it. Adofo-Mensah went all in, mortgaging the future, handing out guaranteed money like candy on Halloween, building what was supposed to be a Super Bowl contender. Instead, they built a mediocre team with one of the worst salary cap situations in the entire NFL. The man literally left his successor with a financial disaster that's going to take years to clean up. And that's exactly why he got fired, by the way. Sure, the timing was influenced by Sam Darnold winning a Super Bowl with Seattle after Minnesota let him walk, but the real reason Kwesi got the boot was this absolute salary cap nightmare. When the Wilf family and the rest of Vikings management sat down and looked at the numbers, they realized they were handcuffed. They're 30th in the league for cap space, or dead last depending on what the Dallas Cowboys do, and they have almost no flexibility to make the moves they desperately need to support their young quarterback. Adofo-Mensah gave out contracts loaded with guaranteed money, created massive dead cap hits that can't be traded away, and essentially built a financial prison that the new regime now has to escape from. That's the real crime here. That's why he's gone. The Sam Darnold situation was just the cherry on top of an already toxic sundae. So where does this leave the Vikings defensively? Well, they're about to have some massive holes to fill on the interior defensive line. With both Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave gone, Minnesota is suddenly looking at a defensive tackle room that's paper thin. Sure, they've got some young guys with potential. Levi Drake Rodriguez showed some promise last year, and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins has flashed at times. But these are unproven players being asked to step into massive roles. But here's the good news, and this is where the Vikings are making at least one smart decision in all this chaos. They're keeping Jalen Redmond, and they're doing it in a way that shows they've learned at least something from this disaster. Redmond, who came to Minnesota as an undrafted free agent from the XFL's Arlington Renegades in June of 2024, had an absolutely spectacular breakout season in 2025. The man recorded 62 combined tackles, 6 sacks, 8 quarterback hits, 5 pass deflections, 2 fumble recoveries, and a forced fumble while playing in all 17 games and starting 15. He was arguably the best defensive lineman on the entire roster, outplaying both of those expensive Pro Bowl veterans that Minnesota is now releasing. And get this, Redmond only has 2 accrued seasons in the NFL, which makes him an exclusive rights free agent. That means the Vikings can tender him a 1-year league minimum contract, and he literally cannot negotiate with other teams. He either signs with Minnesota or sits out the season. It's the ultimate team-friendly contract situation, and the Vikings are taking full advantage. But here's where it gets interesting. According to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, Redmond isn't just getting the tender, he's an extension candidate. The Vikings want to lock him up long-term, reward him for his incredible play, and build around him as a cornerstone defensive piece. Industry projections have Redmond's market value at around $12.5 million per year, which is way more reasonable than the contracts they gave Allen and Hargrave. This is what smart team building looks like. Find the diamonds in the rough, the undrafted guys who outperform their contracts, and lock them up before they hit the open market. Redmond went from being the 90th man on the roster to a potential $15 million per year player in less than 2 years. That's the kind of player evaluation that actually works in the NFL. Compare that to what happened with Allen and Hargrave. Minnesota threw massive contracts at aging veterans with injury histories and declining production, hoping they could recapture their Pro Bowl form. Instead, they got one mediocre season and are now eating millions in dead cap money just to move on. That's the difference between building for the future and trying to buy a championship with someone else's credit card. Now, the Vikings aren't done making moves. There are still more dominoes waiting to fall. According to multiple reports, Pro Bowl edge rusher Jonathan Greenard is available for trade. The Vikings are shopping him around, looking for a second or third round pick in return because Greenard is set to count $22.6 million against the cap in 2026. If they can't find a trade partner, they might have to release him too, which would be another huge blow to the defense. Then there's center Ryan Kelly, who missed 9 games last season due to 3 concussions. The Vikings are seriously considering releasing him because of health concerns and his massive cap hit. If Kelly goes, that's another hole on an offensive line that already struggled last year. Add it all up, and you're looking at a roster that's going to look drastically different in 2026 than it did in 2025. Aaron Jones, the starting running back, gone. Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, the starting defensive tackles, gone. Potentially Jonathan Greenard, the Pro Bowl edge rusher, gone. Potentially Ryan Kelly, the veteran center, gone. That's 4 or 5 starters from last year's team that might not be around when training camp opens. And here's the real problem that nobody's talking about. Every one of these moves creates a new roster hole that needs to be filled, but the Vikings don't have the cap space to go out and sign quality replacements. They're stuck in this vicious cycle where they cut players to create cap room, but then they need to replace those players with cheaper options, which makes the roster worse, which makes it harder to compete. Think about the offensive side of the ball. If Aaron Jones is gone, who's the running back? If Ryan Kelly is gone, who's the center? Minnesota needs to support J.J. McCarthy with weapons and protection, but instead, they're stripping away the veteran talent around him. That's not a recipe for developing a young quarterback. That's a recipe for getting him killed behind a makeshift offensive line. On defense, the situation is even more dire. Without Allen, Hargrave, and potentially Greenard, the Vikings are looking at a front seven that's built around unproven young players and bargain bin free agents. Sure, Brian Flores is a defensive genius who can scheme around talent limitations, but even he needs some level of talent to work with. You can't just run a bunch of practice squad players out there and expect to compete in the NFC North against the Lions, Packers, and Bears. Speaking of the division, let's talk about the competitive landscape the Vikings are walking into. The Detroit Lions just went to the Super Bowl, potentially winning it all. The Green Bay Packers are building something special with Jordan Love. The Chicago Bears have the #1 overall pick and are adding elite talent. And the Vikings? They're cutting their best players just to get under the salary cap. That's the reality of where this franchise is right now. While their division rivals are getting better, Minnesota is getting worse by necessity. They're not making these moves because they think the roster will be better without Jonathan Allen and Aaron Jones. They're making these moves because they have to, because Kwesi Adofo-Mensah left them with no other choice. And that brings us to the quarterback situation, which is the elephant in the room that everyone's tiptoeing around. J.J. McCarthy was Adofo-Mensah's guy. He traded up to draft him 10th overall, invested significant draft capital, and declared him the future of the franchise. But now, Adofo-Mensah is gone, and the new regime coming in after the draft isn't tied to that decision. What if interim GM Rob Brzezinski and whoever they eventually hire as the permanent GM don't believe in McCarthy the way Kwesi did? What if they look at his 6-4 record as a rookie starter, his 57.6 completion percentage, his 11 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, and decide they need to bring in serious competition? Or worse, what if they decide McCarthy isn't the answer at all? The Vikings are being linked to every veteran quarterback on the market. Kyler Murray, who just got released by Arizona, is the hottest name. Geno Smith from Seattle is another option. Even Daniel Jones was being discussed before his injury history scared everyone off. The point is, Minnesota is clearly exploring all options at quarterback, which should tell you everything you need to know about their confidence level in McCarthy. Here's the problem, though. Every dollar they spend on a veteran quarterback is a dollar they can't spend filling all these other roster holes. If they trade for Kyler Murray and take on his contract, that limits what they can do at running back, center, defensive tackle, and every other position where they just created vacancies. They're playing financial Jenga, trying to figure out which pieces they can move without the whole tower collapsing. And let's be real about the draft. Yes, the Vikings have 8 picks right now, potentially 9 or more when compensatory picks are handed out. That's great in theory, but Adofo-Mensah's draft record was absolutely terrible. Louis Cini, first round, cut after 2 seasons. Dallas Turner, first round, showed some promise with 8 sacks but still developing. Jordan Addison, first round, talented but can't stay healthy or out of trouble. J.J. McCarthy, first round, massive question mark. Donovan Jackson, first round, anchoring a bad offensive line. 5 first-round picks in 4 years, and maybe one of them is a clear-cut success story. That's a catastrophic hit rate for high draft picks. Now the Vikings are depending on the draft to rebuild their roster with cheap young talent, but they've shown they can't consistently identify and develop that talent. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So what's the solution here? Honestly, there isn't a quick fix. The Vikings are going to have to eat these bad contracts, create cap space wherever they can, and try to build through the draft while supplementing with cheap veteran free agents. It's going to take at least 2 or 3 years to fully clean up this mess, and that's if the new GM knows what they're doing. The good news is they still have some core pieces. Justin Jefferson is still one of the best receivers in football. TJ Hawkinson is a quality tight end when healthy. Brian Flores is still one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. Dallas Turner showed real promise as a pass rusher, and now Jalen Redmond is emerging as a building block on the interior defensive line. But man, the bad news is long. They're $40 million over the cap. They're releasing proven starters just to create breathing room. They have massive holes at running back, center, and defensive tackle with limited resources to fill them. Their quarterback situation is completely up in the air, and they're doing all of this in the most competitive division in football while their rivals are getting stronger. This is what happens when a GM goes all in on a win-now strategy without properly managing the long-term financial health of the roster. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah gambled that he could build a Super Bowl contender in one offseason by throwing money at proven veterans. Instead, he built a mediocre team with crippling cap problems that his successor now has to fix. The Jonathan Allen release is just the latest domino to fall, but it perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with how this roster was constructed. Expensive veteran on a declining trajectory, massive guaranteed money, terrible contract structure, minimal production, and now a painful dead cap hit just to move on. It's the blueprint for how not to build an NFL roster. Looking ahead, Vikings fans better buckle up because this offseason is going to be wild. More cuts are coming. Trade rumors are swirling. Free agency is going to be limited to bargain hunting. The draft is going to be absolutely critical. And through it all, there's going to be constant speculation about whether J.J. McCarthy is really the guy or if Minnesota needs to start over at quarterback again. The Vikings are at a crossroads, and the decisions made over the next few months are going to determine whether this franchise can compete for championships in the J.J. McCarthy era or whether they're stuck in mediocrity for years to come. With $40 million in cap problems, a gutted roster, and massive uncertainty at the most important position in sports, the margin for error is razor thin. But hey, at least they're keeping Jalen Redmond, right? At least they got one thing right in all this chaos. The undrafted free agent from the XFL who became a star while the expensive Pro Bowl veterans flopped is staying in purple and gold. If nothing else, that gives you a little bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, the people making decisions now have learned from the mistakes of the past. As we head toward free agency on March 9th and the draft in late April, keep your eyes on Minnesota because this story is far from over. More moves are coming, more players are getting cut or traded, and the entire complexion of this roster is going to change dramatically over the next 2 months. The Vikings are in full rebuild mode whether they want to admit it or not, and it's all because of the financial mess left behind by the previous regime. Jonathan Allen's release is just the beginning. Buckle up, Vikings fans. It's going to be a bumpy ride. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Vikings roster chaos, make sure you smash that like button, drop a comment below with your thoughts on these moves, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any updates as this crazy offseason continues to unfold. We're on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers before free agency starts, and we need your help to get there. Every subscription, every like, every comment helps us grow this channel and bring you more content about your Minnesota Vikings. What do you think about the Jonathan Allen release? Was it the right move or a huge mistake? Should the Vikings extend Jalen Redmond long-term or just keep him on the tender? And most importantly, what should they do at quarterback? Is J.J. McCarthy the answer, or do they need to bring in a veteran? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to turn on those notifications so you're the first to know when we drop new videos breaking down every twist and turn of this wild Vikings offseason. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. This is just the beginning of what could be the most dramatic offseason in Vikings history. Until next time, this has been your in-depth look at the Vikings roster explosion. Stay tuned, stay informed.
Hey everyone,
and
I'm
Skol
working to hit
Vikings.
2,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.